Yo, what's going on everybody? It's Salvaje. This is my 25 constructor tips video. Get ready to learn a lot about constructors in this video. So my support a creator code and save the world, it's Salvaje. Feel free to use it if you want. With that said, let's get straight into the video. Keep in mind that this is part of my 100 tips hero series, which is why instead of going from 1 to 25, I'm going to be going from 51 all the way up to 75. Alright, so with that said, let's get straight into the video. 51, constructors have actually slower movement speed than all of the other 3 subclasses. So if you're playing a melee constructor, definitely make sure that you always grab the speed boost. Or if you see that you have a melee constructor on your team, feel free to grab the speed boost for them because it is definitely going to help them out. Tip number 52, let's talk about really good gadgets that you want to have as a constructor. The banner is really good for a constructor since they're mostly, usually chilling around the objective. The slow field is really good for melee based constructors. And of course, if you are going to be a constructor that's going to be building a lot of trap tunnels, the supply crate is also a really good gadget. Tip number 53, you can use the going constructor ability to actually destroy loot llamas. Tip number 54, you can use the bull rush ability to destroy llamas or damage loot llamas, and you can also use the bull rush ability to destroy structures, just in case there's a lot of structures around you, because maybe you're in a city area. Just use your bull rush ability if you don't have an obliterator or a cannonade or a bowler launcher. Tip number 55, you can also use the Rosie ability that the constructor has to destroy structures as well as llamas. Keep in mind also, once you place down the Rosie ability, it will not expire until it runs out of bullets. So again, that's just at the time we're making this video. Hopefully that might change in the future, but keep that in mind. Tip number 56, bull rush can actually go through multiple husks. So what I like to, do when I'm using, a constructor that has the bull rush ability. Let's say that I'm playing a melee constructor and I just have a lot of husk around me. What I like to do is I like to wait for that specific moment where I'm about to be overwhelmed, and then I like to use my bull rush ability, because this is just going to kill a lot of husk around me, and it's also going to be spreading the husk pretty evenly. This is really effective at the defensive modes, and it's also really effective at the offensive modes, and the gameplay example in the background should have given you a pretty good idea of what I'm talking about. Tip number 57, the bull rush ability can also be used to push mini bosses away. Sometimes I even push mini bosses off the map because I'm tired of getting blue and purple schematics at the endgame levels of play. Tip number 58, the bull rush ability can also stop smasher charges and taker charges. It's funny because the community sort of thinks that bull rush is a bad ability, but it's not. It's one of the best abilities that the constructor has. Tip number 59, never use the decoy ability if you have next to no husk around you. You ideally want to be using the decoy ability when there's a lot of husk around you or the objective is being overwhelmed. You want to place down the decoy and you want to get as many husks to be around the decoy so that of course you can finish them off very quickly. Tip number 60, you can place a decoy behind the refrigerator husk. That will cause the refrigerator husk to turn around and you're going to be able to get an easy elimination on those guys. Look, let's face it, sometimes we try to go by the side or we try to get high ground on them, and those husks can be really tricky. So if you are struggling with refrigerator husk or you have a lot of refrigerator husk around you, all you got to do is place that decoy and completely obliterate them once they have their back turned on you. Or you can just run the obliterator sniper rifle. Yeah, that's pretty much what I've been doing, because the obliterator sniper rifle shoots through that refrigerator. I hate refrigerator husk, by the way. Anyways, tip number 61, pull out your shield once you're using the going constructor ability, and that will increase your movement by a little bit, because when you're using going constructor, of course, your movement speed gets reduced big time. Tip number 62, throw a plasma pulse after you place down a decoy so that you can maximize how much utility you're going to be getting from that decoy. The plasma pulse is a pretty decent AoE ability, specifically at the lower levels of play. So, of course, mixing it up with the decoy is going to be helping you guys out a lot. Tip number 63. Another thing that I like to do with the plasma pulse is I like to throw it down when I'm completely surrounded, because maybe I don't really have a decoy ability. Or I also like to throw down the plasma pulse ability on a specific choke point and then just run away from that choke point and let the plasma pulse sort of do its job and do a pretty decent amount of damage to the husk. Tip number 64, let's say that you need to go one tile up. Instead of building a staircase, you can just place your decoy, jump on top of the decoy, and then jump to the terrain that you want to go to. If that sounds confusing, just look at the gameplay example on screen and you guys will understand. Tip number 65. Make sure that you're always maximizing your base placements as a constructor. In other words, place your base in an area that is going to give you the most coverage for a specific trap tunnel or a specific objective or multiple objectives. Tip number 66, always make sure that you place your base down as a constructor. It might sound like it's an obvious tip, but sometimes I see endgame level players not placing their base as a constructor because maybe they forgot. It's happened to me a couple of times, by the way. Anyways, if you don't know how to place your base, you open up your trap wheel, you click on floor traps, and then your base should be available in number 1. Tip number 67. Kinetic overload is triggered by knockbacks and staggers. So basically this means that if you run a hardware weapon or a melee weapon that has really high impact, you're going to trigger kinetic overload more often. Tip number 68. Another thing that kinetic overload does is that it increases the critical impact damage, something like that. So basically what this means is that you're going to be doing more damage to the husk after you stagger them. And the best way to maximize this is that if you run a hardware weapon, for example, that has a pretty decent amount of impact, like the lead sled, for example. If I am wrong on my kinetic overload tips, do let me know in the description, because kinetic overload is kind of hard to explain, honestly. Tip number 69, make sure that you build your loadout around your constructor's base if that is going to be the playstyle that you're going after. In other words, don't put heroes in your loadout that is going to be making your melee better when you want your base to sort of add more utility into the field. Tip number 70, and this is a really important one, make sure that you know the purpose that your base serves. So for example, let's say that your hero loadout makes it so that trap tunnels are going to be more effective. You have the Ice King in your loadout, which is going to make Husk move a little bit slower, I believe. You have Thunder Thora, which is going to give electrified floors. And you also have Machinist Harper, which is going to be increasing trap durability. You should be placing that base around your trap tunnels instead of in the objective, because if you place that base in the objective, you got to keep in mind there's like next to no traps in the objective, which means that you're not going to be maximizing your base. So in other words, you have to know what your base loadout is going to accomplish so that you can maximize your base. Tip number 71, let's talk about some constructors that you absolutely want to have because they're pretty great. The Ice King is pretty awesome. Thunder Thora is also really amazing and helpful. Machinist Harper is great and she's part of the base game. And Constructor Penny is also really good because she decreases Bull Rush cooldown, I believe. And like we discussed earlier, the Bull Rush ability is very helpful. Tip number 72, you can throw a Plasma Pulse from the high ground into the low ground. The gameplay example should give you guys a general idea of what I mean by this. Tip number 73, have the right weapon loadouts that benefits your hero loadouts the best. Here's what I mean by that. If you have a loadout that specializes on protecting the objective and adding a lot of utility in the objective, make sure that you're running some long-range weapons. Because since you're going to be protecting the objective and there's probably trap tunnels in front of the objective, that means that you're never going to use a melee weapon. So you're not really being active. You're not really sort of adding value into your team. So if you have a hero loadout that specializes on protecting the objective, feel free to have something like a sniper or an assault rifle, for example, instead of a melee weapon. Alright, tip number 74. When connecting tiles for your base coverage, instead of placing a floor and a wall, just place a staircase, and like that you save 20 materials. And before we get to tip number 75, guys, I just want to point out a like on the video would be highly appreciated, and if you guys want to use my support a creator code, it's Salvaje, that would also be appreciated. But for tip number 75, we're going to talk about some of the best team perks that you guys can run for constructors. So if you're running a melee constructor build, you can run the Bioenergy Source team perk. This is a really good team perk because it's going to be regenerating your shield. Long story short, you can get bioenergy source by obtaining the mythic ninja Lynx Cassandra. She is an event hero, so the only way to get her is from a birthday llama or unless Epic brings her back for some reason. Another really good team perk for constructors is the boom base team perk that you obtain by obtaining the mythic constructor Steel Wool Sid. You can obtain Steel Wool Sid if you complete part 1 of the Canny Valley questline, in other words, the main story. Another top tier team perk for constructors is supercharged traps that you can obtain by recruiting or obtaining the mythic constructor Mega Base Kyle, which is part of the base game. If you're a trap tunnel constructor, supercharged traps is definitely a must. And last but not least, the recycling team perk is also pretty helpful as well. If you enjoyed this video, again, feel free to drop it a like, use my supporter creator code, it's Salvaje, and if you found the video helpful, make sure that you guys subscribe to the channel and also check out my beginner's guide playlist and also my guides playlist in the description of this video for more high quality Fortnite Save the World content. See you guys in the next one, and peace out.